The final phase of a woman's life, which Jung described as the harvest of the soul, begins with a deafening silence that dismantles previous structures of identity and social belonging. This is not ordinary isolation, but an archetypal transition where the caregiver's mask begins to crack, revealing the true face hidden beneath expectations. The queen is not born from external power, but from the visceral need to confront the void left when the roles of daughter and wife no longer define her existence. If you feel your inner journey is just beginning and you wish to explore the mysteries of the psyche, subscribe to the channel so we can walk this path of discovery together. This moment is the prelude to a sovereignty that few have the courage to claim, for it demands the sacrifice of the ego in favor of something much greater and older. The solitude mentioned here should not be confused with abandonment, but rather with solitude, a state of completeness where the woman becomes her own most valuable and necessary company. Jung warned that the second half of life has its own laws, and ignoring them is what causes the illness of the feminine soul that desperately tries to cling to youth. Sitting on her inner throne, the queen begins to observe the fragments of her history, with a clarity that was previously obscured by the noise of demands and projections. It is a phase of spiritual distillation, where what is superfluous is burned in the fire of introspection, leaving only the mineral essence of the being that survived destiny. Each shadow projected on the walls of the inner castle is now seen as an ally, an aspect of herself that was exiled and now cries out for a place. The awakening of this consciousness demands a brutal honesty about who she truly is, when there is no one left to impress or to serve with her vital energy. The queen understands that time now runs inward, requiring total dedication to the individuation process that will lead her to the center of her own personal labyrinth. It is a process of stripping away, where the medals and titles of the outside world lose their luster before the grandeur of what is being gestated in the womb of the psyche. The woman who reaches this stage stops seeking answers outside herself, recognizing that the only legitimate authority to govern her life resides in her spiritual connection. She takes responsibility for every choice made, transforming the weight of the past into a solid foundation upon which her new kingdom will be wisely built. The laws of analytical psychology suggest that this isolation is the womb of transformation, where the lead of common experience is transmuted into the gold of solar and full consciousness. The queen learns to listen to the language of symbols and dreams, realizing that the universe constantly communicates with those who are willing to quiet the noise. The fear of solitude gives way to a profound reverence for the sacred space she has conquered, a territory where no one can enter without her invitation or permission. At this stage, the economy of the soul changes drastically, and she begins to invest her time only in what nourishes her essence and strengthens her character. The dignity of her posture reflects the peace of one who no longer fights against reality, but uses it as raw material for her own continuous evolution. The call to the self is a summons that demands courage, for it implies walking paths uncharted by others and belonging only to one's destiny. Many women recoil from this portal, preferring the comfort of modern distractions to the challenge of looking at their own psychological nakedness with true eyes. However, those who cross the threshold discover that the queen's solitude is the greatest freedom a human being can experience on the face of this earth. They become silent beacons, emitting a light that needs no words to guide those still lost in the storms of superficiality. By embracing this destiny, a woman completes her external search and begins true life, the life lived from the eternal core of her being. Looking at her reflection in the mirror, the woman realizes that the marks on her face are maps of conquered territories and losses that have been duly mourned at the altar of life. The beauty that was once external and ephemeral begins to give way to a radiance emanating from the profound acceptance of her own finitude and accumulated wisdom. Jung saw this stage as the integration of the archetype of the wise crone, a force that no longer seeks approval but emits a natural and unwavering authority. There is no longer room for the paralyzing doubts of youth, for the Queen understands that her life is a unique work of art that possesses intrinsic value. The mirror ceases to be an enemy of aesthetics and becomes a portal to self-knowledge, where each wrinkle tells the story of a battle won internally. The transition to this psychic sovereignty requires that women learn to inhabit their own bodies as sacred ground, recognizing physical limitations as guides to spiritual expansion. The energy that was once directed towards expansion in the external world is now channeled towards the fortification of the inner world, creating a sanctuary of eternal and secure peace. It is a process of disidentification with the body object, transforming it into a body temple that houses the history of an entire lineage of women who came before her. The Queen understands that she is the culmination of generations of struggles and dreams, and this responsibility anchors her in a dignity that the current world ignores. The awakening of the crone is the recognition that the true crown is made of consciousness and not of gold, forged in the heat of transformations. Time ceases to be an executioner that steals youth and becomes the master that refines the rough diamond of the soul through the pressure of lived experiences. Each decade traversed is seen as a geological stratum that supports the mountain of her consciousness, allowing a panoramic view of existence and its natural contradictions. The Queen does not try to hide the scars of her soul, for she knows that they are what allow the light of the spirit to shine through the cracks of her personality. She cultivates an elegance that does not depend on clothes or adornments, but on the way her soul moves in the world, with calm and decisive steps. The beauty of maturity is a vibrational frequency that calms environments and offers comfort to those who are still in conflict with their own age. Accepting the impermanence of all things is the most difficult and, at the same time, the most liberating lesson that a mature woman needs to integrate into her true heart. She observes the seasons of life with the same naturalness with which she observes nature, knowing that the winter of existence brings with it the seeds of eternity. Attachment to the image of who she was in the past dissolves, giving way to a vibrant presence that is fully anchored in the present and real moment. The Queen becomes a guardian of memory and wisdom, someone who knows the value of silence and the exact weight of each word she utters. Her authority is born from this harmony between what she feels internally and what she expresses externally, without masks or artifices of protection. The mirror of her soul now reflects the image of a woman who no longer fears her own darkness, for she has learned to illuminate its depths with the lantern of conscience. She recognizes that true beauty is a state of mind that manifests in the kindness, firmness, and compassion she extends to herself. The elder within her is a faithful advisor, constantly reminding her that what is essential is invisible to the eyes and eternal to the spirit. By honoring her own history, she frees herself from the need to be validated by the gaze of others, finding in her own eyes the approval she always sought outside. The Queen is ready to rule her kingdom with the justice of one who has experienced all sides of the coin and chosen integrity. We often focus on the shadow as something dark, but Jung taught that the golden shadow contains all the talents and potential that a woman has not allowed herself to experience. In this Queen phase, the confrontation is not only with past mistakes, but with the grandeur that has been neglected in favor of family harmony. It is the moment to rescue dreams buried under the weight of duties and give them voice, space, and authority so that they can flourish in the garden. Solitude becomes the alchemical laboratory where these noble elements are isolated and purified, allowing the woman to recognize her own light without any modesty. The fear of her own power is often greater than the fear of her own weakness, and the queen needs courage to sustain this brilliance. Reclaiming the golden shadow requires a woman to forgive herself for keeping small so that others around her would feel comfortable or safe. She realizes that her self-sufficiency is not a threat, but a gift to the world, because an integrated woman does not project her shortcomings onto other beings. This process of reclaiming brings renewed vitality, a kind of second youth that does not depend on hormones, but on a vibrant connection with creativity. By embracing what was most brilliant in her shadow, she ceases to be a spectator of life and becomes the protagonist of the myth. The queen now rules her inner kingdom with a firm hand and an open heart, knowing that her greatest wealth was kept in the basements. Artistic skills, innate leadership, and powerful intuition that have been stifled for years begin to emerge like springs of fresh water in an arid desert. The mature woman no longer has time for self-deception, and the golden shadow demands to be integrated into her conscious personality in a practical and immediate way. She begins to express her truth with a force that surprises those who only knew her in her submissive or overly socially adapted version. This integration brings a sense of wholeness that heals old wounds of inadequacy, as she finally realizes that she has always been complete and wonderful. The queen no longer asks permission to shine. She simply occupies her rightful place in the hierarchy of her own existence and destiny. This confrontation requires her to face the envy others may feel upon seeing her light. But the queen knows she is not responsible for the discomfort of others. She understands that her light does not extinguish anyone else's, but serves as a silent invitation for others to also seek the treasure hidden in their shadows. The courage to be great is the greatest ethical challenge of the final phase, as it implies abandoning the security of mediocrity to embrace the risk of excellence. Each talent rediscovered is another tool for building a legacy that makes sense for her soul and for the human collective. Female sovereignty is consolidated when a woman stops apologizing for her intelligence, her strength, and her ability to see beyond. The golden shadow is the fuel that powers the final phase of the journey, transforming the melancholy of age into the joy of one who has discovered who they truly are. The queen uses this energy to create, to teach, and to sustain the world with a presence that is simultaneously powerful and welcoming to all. She no longer fears the depths, for she knows that it is there that the purest gold is found by those who have the patience to dig. Her life becomes an example that it is never too late to reclaim one's own soul and to live the fullness of who one is. The integration of the shadow is the definitive step for the queen to govern with the totality of her being, without internal divisions. Governing oneself requires the art of detachment, not out of contempt for the world, but out of a clear understanding that nothing external can fill the chalice. The queen learns to release expectations about her children, control over her partner, and the need to be useful in order to be loved by all. This detachment is a process of refinement, where dense emotions such as resentment and bitterness are transformed into understanding and pure compassion. Jung described this as the circulation of psychic energy that is no longer trapped in personal complexes, but flows freely towards the center. With each thing she lets go of, a new space of serenity opens up, allowing wisdom to flow unobstructed through the inner channels. Sacred detachment also involves accepting the parts of life that didn't go as planned, transforming apparent failures into fertilizer for personal growth. The woman at this stage doesn't look back with regret, but with the reverence of someone who understands that every detour was necessary to get here. She becomes an observer of life's tides, knowing when to act and when to simply allow destiny to follow its natural course without intervention. This posture of non-action is one of the deepest marks of feminine sovereignty, indicating that she no longer fights against the reality of the world. The queen is the one who possesses everything because she clings to nothing, finding in her psychological nakedness the most royal and majestic garment. Releasing herself from the need to control outcomes is what allows the queen to live in a state of grace and constant flow with the universe. She understands that true security doesn't come from bank accounts or life insurance, but from unwavering confidence in her own inner resilience. Detachment from the opinions of others grants her a freedom of movement that most people will never know in their entire limited existence. She can now dedicate her energy to what is eternal, letting go of fights for crumbs of attention or irrelevant slices of social power. The queen discovers that, by relinquishing control, she gains true authority over the course of her own history and her own peace. This process of emotional cleansing is comparable to the purification of metal in alchemy, where the fire of conscious suffering separates the essence from the useless and heavy dross. The mature woman becomes light, not because life is easy, but because she has stopped carrying the dead weight of grudges that do not belong to her. She forgives not out of weakness, but out of a vital need to keep her heart clean for the revelations that the final phase holds for her. Sacred detachment is the final act of rebellion against a world that tries to convince us that happiness depends on accumulation and possession. The queen walks through the world with open hands, ready to receive what the moment offers and to let go of what has already served its purpose. The peace emanating from this woman is contagious, for she demands nothing from her surroundings, offering in return the stability of one who is centered within herself. She no longer gets lost in the dramas of others, knowing how to discern between what deserves her attention and what is merely noise from the collective unconscious. Her solitude is filled by a divine presence that requires no intermediaries or complex rituals to be felt in her skin and soul. The queen inhabits emptiness with the same naturalness with which she inhabits abundance, knowing that both are two sides of the same coin of human existence. In detachment, she finds the crown that can never be stolen, for it was forged in silence and in the acceptance of what is real. The final phase described by Jung culminates in the sacred inner marriage, where the woman fully integrates her masculine side, the animus, ceasing to seek heroes. She discovers that the strength, logic, and protection she previously sought in men are present within her own psychic structure as life tools. Your journey of self-discovery deserves to be constantly deepened. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next steps in this transformation. By pacifying the animus, the queen ceases to fight against the masculine and begins to use it as an ally that gives form to intuitions. This mystical union brings a balance that is reflected in an unshakable peace where doing and being coexist in perfect divine harmony. This inner balance removes the need for fanciful romantic projections, allowing real relationships to be seen clearly and without the burden of expectations. The queen becomes whole in herself, an indivisible unit that does not need another half to feel complete or secure in the great cosmos. Jung emphasized that this integration is the ultimate goal of the individuation process, where the opposites within the psyche finally cease their age-old war. The energy that was once wasted on internal conflicts is now used for contemplation and for radiating wisdom that guides others. It is the stage where love ceases to be a need born of want and becomes a state of being, a constant offering. The integration of the inner masculine allows the queen to manifest her projects in the world with an efficiency that previously seemed unattainable due to lack of focus or courage. She no longer feels fragmented between feeling and acting, as thought and emotion now work in synchronicity towards her purpose. The woman who achieves this mystical union becomes a force of nature, capable of sustaining grand visions while keeping her feet firmly on the ground. She stops waiting for someone to protect or validate her, assuming the role of her own guardian and her own source of inspiration. The inner marriage is the celebration of absolute autonomy, where the feminine and the masculine dance together in the creation of a full reality. By ceasing to project her needs onto external men, she liberates the men around her to simply be human beings, with their real flaws and virtues. Her relationships become much healthier and more authentic, based on partnership and mutual respect, rather than emotional dependence or the search for saviors. The Queen discovers that solitude is the fertile ground where this marriage takes place, far from the noise of social expectations that dictate how she should behave. She becomes the bride and groom of her own soul, celebrating an eternal banquet that nourishes all dimensions of her conscious being. This unity is the foundation of true spiritual authority, which needs no external temples to manifest in all its glory. The union of opposites heals the division between body and spirit, allowing the woman to live her spirituality in an embodied and present way on earth. She sees the sacred in every daily task, from tending the garden to managing her most complex and challenging responsibilities. The Queen does not flee the world to find the divine, for she has found it within herself, in the reconciliation of her inner polarities. This state of being is what Jung called conjunctio, the highest point of human alchemy, where the soul becomes radiant and whole. She is now a center of psychic gravity, attracting to her orbit only that which resonates with her new frequency of integrity. The Queen no longer fears the depths of the forest of her own unconscious, for she has learned the language of dreams and the symbols of the soul. Where others would see danger and darkness, she finds mystery and renewal, voluntarily plunging into the waters of the psyche to seek pearls of profound wisdom. The silence that once seemed empty is now revealed as fertile, laden with insights that can only be heard when the noise of the ego is silenced. She walks among the trees of her ancestry, honoring the roots that sustain her while extending her branches towards the infinity of the spirit. Each encounter with the symbolic strengthens her connection to the sacred feminine, a force that transcends time and culture to touch the being. In this wild and sacred territory, the woman discovers that her solitude is populated by archetypal presences that teach her about the cyclical nature of everything. She understands that life and death are sisters who walk hand in hand, and that the final phase is a preparation for birth. The Queen becomes a bridge between the visible and the invisible world, serving as a guardian of mysteries that modern society has forgotten to value. She no longer seeks answers in books or gurus, for the inner forest offers all the necessary guidance for those who know how to listen to their hearts. Her authority is born from this direct connection with the source, making her immune to fleeting opinions and the intellectual fads of her historical time. The forest is where she meets the women she was in other decades, embracing each version of herself with compassion and love. She converses with the frightened child, the rebellious young woman, and the exhausted mother, integrating them all into the majestic unity that she is now. This inner dialogue pacifies regrets and transforms the story of her life into a narrative of triumph and continuous spiritual growth. The Queen understands that each mistake was a seed, and each pain was fertilizer for the tree of wisdom that now offers shade. She inhabits the silence with the dignity of one who no longer needs to explain herself to the world, finding rest in her own inner truth. At this stage, intuition becomes an infallible compass, guiding her steps with a precision that rational logic could never achieve or even comprehend. She knows what must be done without needing lengthy deliberations, acting in harmony with the invisible forces that govern destiny and life. The forest of the unconscious is no longer a place of nightmares, but a garden of constant revelations for the one who has learned to tame her fears. The queen walks confidently among the archetypes, recognizing in them the mirrors of her own divinity and her own humanity shared with all. She is the mistress of her destiny because she knows the dark paths and the luminous shortcuts of her own deep and vast mind. The fertile silence produces fruits of creativity and peace that nourish not only the queen, but all who come into contact with her presence. She doesn't need to make grand speeches to be heard, for her energy communicates a truth that pierces the mental defenses of those who observe her. In this phase, the woman becomes a receptacle for collective wisdom, filtering what is eternal from what is merely ephemeral and banal. She lives in a state of continuous prayer, not as a religious ritual, but as an attitude of reverence before the mystery of existence. The queen is the guardian of the sacred fire, keeping the flame of consciousness burning while the world outside is lost in darkness. Female sovereignty demands that all past pains be transmuted into a legacy of wisdom that can serve as a light for generations to come. The queen views her wounds not as scars of defeat, but as channels through which the light of consciousness could finally penetrate her. She understands that her personal history is a fragment of human history and that her healing contributes to the healing of the collective feminine unconscious. The alchemical gold she carries in her hands is the compassion distilled from years of struggle, loss, and eventual triumph over bitterness. This legacy is not made of material possessions, but of a presence that teaches others to be authentic through living example. The transmission of this wisdom often occurs silently, through a look, a gesture, or the simple refusal to participate in dramas. The queen becomes the natural mentor, one who does not impose rules, but invites others to look into their own depths with great courage. She knows that true power is not exercised over others, but manifested through the ability to remain centered amidst external chaos. Her words gain weight because they are the result of a life lived with depth, without escapes or psychological anesthesia in the face of suffering. By transforming her tears into gold, she closes the cycle of pain in her lineage and opens a path of dignity for women. Each moment of sorrow she faced in her solitude was a necessary step in refining her soul so that she could shine. The queen does not hide her difficult past, but uses it as a bridge of empathy to help those who are still in the midst of the storm. She teaches that suffering, when faced head-on, is the greatest teacher a soul can have on the path to true sovereignty. Her life becomes a testament to the fact that the most lasting beauty is born from the ashes of the ego that has been burned by the fire of absolute reality. She exudes a strength that is not aggressive, but unwavering, like a mountain that withstands all climates without losing its essence. The queen's legacy is proof that a woman can rebuild herself from any fragment as long as she has the courage to be honest. She leaves her daughters and granddaughters not only memories, but a standard of integrity that invites them to never accept less than they deserve. Her life example is a map showing where the treasures and traps lie on the path to feminine and true individuation. She becomes a strong link in the ancestral chain, honoring those who came before and preparing the ground for those who will come after her departure. The transmutation of suffering is her last great work of art, the culmination of a lifetime of searching. The peace she achieves is the result of making peace with all her shadows and forgiving all her enemies. She no longer carries the poison of resentment in her cup, but only the wine of wisdom, which she generously shares with those who know how to appreciate it. The queen understands that her final mission is to be an example that life has meaning, even amidst the deepest pains of the soul. She walks towards the end of her earthly reign with the serenity of one who has fulfilled the sacred contract she signed with her own conscience. The gold of her soul illuminates the twilight of her existence, transforming the evening into a spectacle of light, color, and eternal meaning. Absolute freedom is the ultimate prize for the queen who has traversed the stages of denial and resistance to embrace her own truth without restrictions. She is no longer bound by the chains of fear of others' judgment, for the only judge left is her own solar and full consciousness. Solitude ceases to be a burden and becomes a temple, a place of worship to life and the cosmic intelligence that coordinates the universe. In this space of freedom, she can explore dimensions of consciousness that were closed while she was busy pleasing the world and others. Each moment of stillness is a celebration of hard-won autonomy, a silent toast to the woman she has dared to be. This freedom manifests as a lightness of spirit, an ability to laugh at herself and the ironies of existence with a sacred benevolence. The queen no longer needs to prove anything to anyone, which gives her a paradoxical power of influence over the reality around her and her destiny. She moves through the world with the elegance of one who knows she is only passing through, but that each step taken is sacred and has a purpose. Her solitude is now a force field that protects her from scattered energies, allowing her to maintain her focus on what is eternal. She is living proof that conscious maturity is the pinnacle of the human journey and not a regrettable decline towards the end. At this stage, the queen discovers she can say no without guilt and yes, only to what makes her soul vibrate in cosmic harmony. She no longer feels obligated to participate in empty social rituals or superficial conversations that drain her precious vital energy as a sovereign. Her presence is selective, which makes her even more valuable to those who have the honor of sharing her time and wisdom. The freedom she experiences is internal, independent of external circumstances or the limitations that her physical body may now begin to present. She inhabits a mental space where the boundaries of the ego dissolve, allowing her to feel connected to everything that exists in the cosmos. Claimed solitude is the opposite of imposed solitude, for it is a conscious choice of one who has discovered that their own company is a royal feast. The queen cultivates her inner garden with the same care she would give to an empire, knowing that every thought is a seed of reality. She finds pleasure in simple things, like the taste of tea, the touch of the wind, and the silence that precedes the dawn of a new day. Her happiness does not depend on external events, for she has learned to generate her own light from the core of her integrated consciousness. She is free because she desires nothing more than what is within her reach or within her wise and generous heart. The Temple of Solitude is where she holds her deepest conversations with the divine, without the need for dogmas, creeds, or human intermediaries. The queen feels the pulse of life in her veins and recognizes in it the same rhythm that moves the tides and distant galaxies in the sky. She is at peace with her journey, knowing that each struggle was a preparation for this state of absolute freedom and inner sovereignty. The dignity of her old age is a silent protest against a culture that fears time and tries to hide death behind masks. She faces the horizon with a smile of one who knows that true life does not end here, but only changes form and plane. In the final stage of individuation, the queen realizes that the boundaries between herself and the universe are becoming increasingly tenuous and transparent. She no longer sees herself as an isolated ego, but as a conscious expression of life contemplating itself through her experienced and calm eyes. The journey that began with the search for identity ends in the transcendence of that very identity, merging the individual droplet into the great divine ocean. Jung observed that this is the moment of preparation for the great journey, where fear is replaced by curiosity about what lies beyond. Feminine sovereignty reaches its fullness when the woman becomes a pure channel for the wisdom of the universe, without filters or interference. Thank you for joining us in this profound reflection on the soul. Your journey is unique, so please subscribe to the channel so we can continue sharing knowledge that transforms the being. The Queen relinquishes her crown, not out of weakness, but in recognition that she has fulfilled her role in the tapestry of existence and now rests. The final silence is a symphony of gratitude for all that has been lived, suffered, loved, and understood throughout decades of inner searching. She becomes a beacon of peace for all who cross her path, emanating a tranquility that defies rational explanation and touches the soul. The Queen's solitude is the discovery that we have never been alone, but rather immersed in an ocean of meaning that connects all living beings. She closes her eyes to the world with the certainty that the light she cultivated will never be extinguished, for it belongs to the eternal spirit. The individuation process is completed when a woman realizes that she is the path itself, the traveler, and the final destination of the quest. There is no longer a separation between the sacred and the profane, for everything she touches is imbued with the sacredness of her awakened and total consciousness. The Queen observes the world with the tenderness of one who sees a growing garden, knowing that each plant has its right time to bloom. She retreats to the core of her being, where duality disappears and only pure and silent presence remains as a witness to life. Her departure from this plane will be as majestic as her stay, leaving behind a trail of light that will not be extinguished. The lessons she leaves behind are seeds of awareness that will germinate in the hearts of those who have ears to hear the truth of their soul. She taught that solitude is not a punishment, but the gateway to true freedom and to the encounter with the eternal self. The Queen proved that it is possible to age with dignity, keeping an open mind, a warm heart, and a vibrant spirit until the last breath. She is proof that the feminine soul possesses a regenerative force that can transform any desert into an oasis of wisdom and peace. Her legacy is the courage to be who you are, without masks, without fears, and without the need for approval from the outside world. The ultimate transcendence is the return home, to the original unity from which all beings emerged and to which all will inevitably one day return. The Queen walks towards the light with the confidence of one who knows the path, for she has walked it many times in her meditations. She dissolves into totality, but her essence remains alive in every act of consciousness performed by those who follow in her footsteps on the path of individuation. The throne is now empty on earth, but the Queen reigns forever in the realm of the spirit, where time does not exist and peace reigns. Her story is eternal, engraved in the stars and in the unconscious of all women who seek the sovereignty of their own true souls.